You all know the shtick by now. Sewing patterns are expensive and they should work hard for us. The 8177 is no exception. I am on my third iteration and there will be more. I have made the original, which is the maxi dress with straps. I've done a sew along for the entire making process of that dress, which you can find up here and also linked in the description down below. A few of you asked me to do another video showing how I added the sleeves onto the dress, and I have done that in this red version, which I absolutely love. And then I decided to take things a step further. I wanted to combine the straps with the sleeves, and I also thought this would be a really good opportunity to try my hand at some slightly different pattern hacking by making this a zip-up back dress with a waist that I could add any skirt that I liked to. Now, this is my wearable muslin and it's come out amazingly well, although there are a few things that I want to tweak for the next one. So there isn't going to be a sew along for this one coming out. Number one, the fabric was an absolute nightmare to see what I was doing. I did film the sew along, and as I say, there are a few tweaks that I want to make to this, which turned out to be happy accidents for this wearable muslin, but for future dresses I do want to address. The first one is the straps. I need to just tweak how much I take off or leave on to the sleeve to get the strap to go in. They are sitting a little bit further over than the pattern intends. I think it's worked out fine. I don't think it's a big deal. I really like the addition of the straps. The elastic's nice, don't get me wrong, but I think the kind of like security of the strap with the poofiness of the sleeve added is something that I really like. I think maybe me only having a 1/4 inch elastic for the red version did kind of add to the sort of flimsy feeling that the straps had. It's meant to have 1/2 inch elastic and that's just not what I had in stock. I like the ruffle that the 1/4 inch elastic created on the red one, but it does feel a little flimsy. I also have lengthened the sleeves and added cuffs and trim and done some shearing on these ones. That's a really easy hack to do, and I will show you how to do that when I do the sew along for this version of the dress. The happy accident that's occurred this time is the bodice on this white dress is a touch longer than I would like, so it's ended up being a drop waist. When I made this one, I made up the muslin, or I made up the lining first and kind of just held it up to myself and was like, yeah, that'll do. What I should have done is make a proper wearable muslin. Now technically this was inexpensive fabric. This was lace trim that I had in my stash, but this was one of the most labor intensive dresses I have made in a long time, apart from the 9076. Sew along for that one coming soon. The vote's nearly done on Patreon. I'm excited to see which fabric combo the peeps pick. But back to this dress. This technically is a wearable muslin, as I say, inexpensive Swiss dot viscose that I got from the Textile Centre. They are open again. I will list them down below. This fabric was bought years ago and I haven't seen anything like it for a long time. It is slightly sheer, so I have interlined the bodice but left the sleeves as one layer, and I love how that looks. The skirt is one layer of tiered and gathered skirtness, which there is a tutorial for up here and again listed in the description down below. This time round I decided to add what should be insertion lace but is actually just a lace fabric that I ended up cutting apart. It was a white, off-white, grey and blue stripe. It was gorgeous, but it's a very thick cotton lace, so as a fabric I couldn't work out what I was going to do with it, and I cut the 6 meters I had into many strips of trim, which is amazing, and I have used them twice now on dresses very similar to this one. It does mean that there isn't the flange that an insertion trim usually has, that is what you sew into the body of the fabric that you're sewing the lace trim to. I will show you some close-ups of what I'm talking about here. So it was a very tedious process getting this lace trim into the gathered strips of fabric neatly. I did it. It took forever though. It took me a whole day just to get this skirt completed, and then it took another day to get all the finishing lace or like details added to it. But overall I think it's really effective. Now, like I say, it's ended up being a drop waist dress on me, but that's not the worst thing in the world. It's not what I was going for, it's not what I wanted, and that's why I'm not putting the sew along out for this one, because as I say, I still need to make some tweaks to this one to get it to be the perfect waisted dress that you can, or bodice that you can then add any kind of skirt to that you want. And I'm going to do that by adding a different type of skirt to the next one I make, because there will be more. But for this one, the drop prices actually ended up being a real godsend, because this dress is intended to be worn under the dirndl that I'm attempting to make next. I have this amazing birder pattern, which the very lovely Karen sent me, and she's also sent me some amazing silk brocade, silk ribbon, and the little lacing doodads for the front of my dirndl. Now, the birder pattern that you can see here, the dress is integral to the bodice. Whilst I love it, I want mine to be more of a layering piece, so I'm going to make the dirndl part separately from the dress. So I needed something to wear underneath of it, and this Swiss dot fabric was just kind of the perfect thing because it's light and sheer and floofy and would make great bishopy big billowy sleeves. I also didn't have 11 meters, yes, 11 meters, which is what the birder pattern requires, of a border eyelet lace cotton fabric. I didn't have that, so I thought this dress would end up being a great layering piece to go underneath of the dirndl, and I think it's turned out amazingly. And that's why the drop waist is great, because there is a lot of gathering from the top tier into the bodice of this dress, and if that had gone directly onto the waist and then I put the dirndl over the top of it, I can imagine that it would have been slightly uncomfortable because I want the dirndl to be as close fitting as possible, but because the gathering is about an inch underneath of my waist, I think it's going to work out perfectly. And I've tried this dress on last night with a couple of different belts and it looks really, really cool. So I actually think this dress is going to end up being something that does get worn in a variety of different ways, even though it is the floofiest over the top dress that there ever was, and maybe that I've ever made. I put this picture up last night onto Instagram and the community page on YouTube just to say why there wasn't a video coming out on Friday evening, because it had taken me this long to make this floofier dress, and it is pretty epic. So I think you can agree that all three of these dresses next to each other look very, very different. They are obviously the same style, but that's the same thing with all of my pattern hacks or patterns should work hard for us videos. It's obviously a repetition of the same shape and silhouette, but obviously tweaked in different ways and then made up in different fabrics gives you very, very different looks. I absolutely love all three of these, and this is going to become another one of my TNT dresses because it doesn't take too much fabric. The maxi dress I got out of, I think, about 3.5 meters, and then this red one I got out of the same 3.5 meters. Now, even though this one's midi, because I had the sleeves and the sleeves are giant, I think that was why they took the same amount of fabric. This one I had 4 meters of fabric and I went nuts on the skirt. The bottom layer of this tiered and gathered skirt has 8 panels in it, which is why it's so floofy. The first tier has 2 and then the second tier has 6. So there is a lot of volume in this skirt, and it is a very heavy skirt, which is again why I think it's dragging it down and weighting it so that it's becoming a drop waist dress on me rather than one that's sitting at my actual waist. But again, happy accident. I can imagine making this dress multiple times. These two are amazing and they skim at the waist but they don't cinch, which is going to be great for the hot months because I'm hoping to go to see my brother in Kuala Lumpur and it's always warm out there. My sister-in-law has been a couple of times now and she said anything that cinches at the waist you will be uncomfortable in, so I think these ones that skim are going to be great. But we all know how I like to cinch at the waist, so having the option to put the waist seam in and have it come very, very tight because of the back zip rather than the buttons is another really lovely option. And it's a great neckline. It's kind of reminiscent of the Grace dress, the KB Grace dress, without being quite so cleavage-tastic, and it doesn't have the hugest straps. It's another really good option for duping that dress, as well as the By Hand London Kim and then the Lacala 4131. I think I have that number right. Again, everything will be listed in the description down below. This is the McCalls Ashley pattern. This is one of their kind of like, they rebranded for a while, started naming all of their dresses, so you can follow the Ashley McCalls hashtag to see other versions of this. Also the hashtag M8177 is one to follow on Instagram as well if you like this style. People have made absolutely beautiful ones and I really like how the different fabrics look. So far I've only made it in viscoses. I can definitely see myself making this in a cotton lawn. I think that would look really nice. Possibly even sort of like a slightly heavier weight fabric, maybe a quilting cotton for if I wanted a very kind of like structured skirt. These ones all flow very nicely, but with a quilting cotton it would be a lot more more sticky outy, but again, we all know how I like that, so it's not the worst thing in the world. I will say I hate the facings. Absolutely hate the facings. The facings on this one, I've done everything to them that you are meant to do, and they still kind of roll out at the top, which I find annoying. So for this one, I actually did a lining that came to the waistline, which was again practice for this one, and again should have let me know that it was maybe half an inch too long. Never mind. When I have my next batch of viscose Marrakein in from the fabric room, I'm actually going to cut out skirt pieces and sew those onto the lining for this one, so that this dress ends up being fully lined. It's just personal preference. As I say, I absolutely hate facings. They are not my friend. I don't like them. I don't like the finish that they give. I don't like when they roll out and they're visible. They annoy me. So I'm probably going to end up fully lining most of my dresses going forward. That, on the other hand, is not the worst thing in the world, because I have a lot of lightweight fabrics I can imagine making this up in, and as long as I am using something that breathes, I don't think it's going to add too much to the kind of like heaviness or the clinginess of those dresses. There are a couple of ways that you can fully line a dress like this. You can just cut out the outer pieces from your lining fabric and sew those in. The only trouble with that is you can sometimes have the fabric peek out at the neckline, even with understitching and, you know, tacking everything into place. You can still sometimes get a little bit of a roll and a peek of the lining. Not the worst thing in the world if it's the same colour, but if it's a very different colour, that's maybe not what you want. So I'm going to go through and show you guys how I would draft a lining for this using my facing pieces and the original pattern pieces, so that you end up with what is technically a facing of the outer fabric, and then the rest of it will be a lining fabric. Or you can go the way that I did with the red dress and use the outer fabric to make pieces that go to the waist, and then sew on lining fabric to those, so that you end up with a lining that weights down the dress and hangs the same way as the outer fabric, but you're not using all of the outer fabric to basically make a second dress. Again, with some of the viscoses out there, that would be incredibly expensive and wasteful in my opinion, when you can get the viscose linings that I use from the fabric room for like £3.40 per metre. There are lots of different options for lining this thing. The envelope itself, as I mentioned earlier, is part of the rebrand, so it now has a name. It does have some finished garment measurements on the back. It's got the bust, it's got the hips, and it's got the length from base of neck. So helpful, but not all of the ones we need. What would have been great is the bicep. Even though these are very big sleeves, it would have been nice to know. It would have been nice to know base of neck to waistline, because these patterns are drafted, from the best of my knowledge, for a 5'6" frame. And as I mentioned, I have a long torso, so I know I need to add length to my patterns. Some people need to take it away. Again, depends on your proportion as to which alterations you'd need to make, but I do think that that would be a very useful measurement to have. Obviously the waist. The waist finished garment measurements are on pattern piece number 1, and I have written them down. It's 27 inches for the 6, 28 for the 8, 29 for the 10, 30.5 for the 12, and 32 for the 14, and I will put those in the description as well. I don't have the largest size bundle, so I don't have the measurements for that, but they have added 4 inches of ease at the waist of this garment, which I think is excessive, and maybe why she's wearing a belt on the pattern envelope here. You do have to be slightly careful about the amount of ease that you have for a button-up dress, because even if it can fit you very snugly, if it's got buttons along the front, they can gape even if it fits you. So that is something to bear in mind. I went for half an inch of ease at the bust, and I went for an inch of ease at the waist, and I doubled up the amount of buttonholes that the pattern requested. So I put in the buttonholes that the pattern gives you the buttonhole placement guide for, and tried it on, and it gaped. Even though it fit, it gaped. So I went back and added buttonholes in between each of those buttonholes, so 22 in total, and it fits so much better in my opinion. I really like how it looks. The other thing to bear in mind with this pattern is, as I mentioned, it's drafted for a 5'6" frame. As I say, to the best of my knowledge, that's what all of the big 4, big 5, the big 1, this company are drafted for. I'm 5'8", and I added an inch of length to the torso, but this is the maxi dress version, and it just comes above the floor. So if you are shorter than 5'8", you might want to have a think about measuring the skirt panels from the waist down and adjusting it to your preferred skirt length. I didn't go for the short version. It was way too short for me. I went for a midi version with this red one, and I love that length. I took 9 inches inches off of the maxi dress, so I think it's ended up being around about 30 to 31 inches long, the midi dress that I've done here. So that is something to bear in mind, because if you are shorter than 5'6", the maxi dress without any alterations to it may be too long for you. And if you are taller than 5'6", like me, I'm 5'8", or if you're taller than 5'8", it might be one of those awkward sort of just above the ankle skimming lengths that looks like you haven't decided between midi or maxi, and it's just kind of that awkward length. So that is something to bear in mind when you are tracing this out. Now I do trace out my patterns, it's just my preference. I like to have the original pattern preserved because I can go back to it if I change size, or if my mum wants to borrow this, because mum has, you know, been making gooey eyes at these dresses since I've made them. So personally I do trace my patterns, and I will be doing a video about how and why very, very soon. I've been threatening that for years. Overall, I love the Ashley dress. I think it's gorgeous. I think it's a really versatile piece. The only sleeve that I'm probably not going to do is the short one with the gathers in it. It is wider and more flared than this sleeve. I have traced both off. I do want to try it, but I have a feeling that I will end up leaving it as like a flutter sleeve and not putting the channel and the gathering in at the bottom of the shorter one. It's just my preference. I don't really like a puff sleeve on me at that height, but the 3/4 length sleeve is lovely. This one was really easy to elongate. It's a straight up and down sleeve, so I literally added 5 inches of length, which has worked out quite well. And it is it just comes over the hand just, but as I say, I've got shearing elastic in here, so it would be very easy to add the elastic channel at the bottom and have it gathered right down at the cuff. You could definitely add on a continuous lap and a button cuff if you wanted to as well. That's another option. There is a tutorial for how to do a continuous lap listed up here. Again, I'll put it in the description down below. I personally prefer that rather than adding the cuff to the underarm seam. I just think it looks neater, and it gives you the opportunity to finish the seams in a neater fashion for my preference. So that's why I would do it that way, but that's a definite possibility. Something else you could do with the gored skirt as well is add in godays. I have never tried drafting a goday, but this is something I thought about when I was just about to film this video. It's something that I'm definitely willing to give it a try. If you wanted a kind of flash of a different color, or if you wanted an even fuller skirt, a goday would be a really easy addition to the panels of the dress. There's plenty of seams for the godays to go into, and it would give a really beautiful effect. So that's something that I want to try in the future. And again, if you're interested, I will definitely try and film my thought process and how I do it and the finished results video if you would like to see that. I think you can tell I'm so happy with all of these dresses. I have worn the maxi dress out a couple of times. I haven't worn the red one yet, but I will do. Can't wait to add the skirt lining to that one just to finish it off beautifully. I think it's going to work really, really well. I am so looking forward to seeing what this one looks like layered up under the kind of dirndl pieces, and perhaps even like faux stays, the butterick pattern that I've been threatening to make for a while. I think that's going to work out really, really well. I also can imagine wearing this dress with some of my chunkier belts and boots in the cooler months, perhaps even a kind of gilet over the top, a knitted gilet. It could be quite fun with these sleeves. So I do think that this, whilst it's a very floofy dress, could end up being quite a versatile dress for me, and I'm so grateful to the Patreon Peeps for voting for this pattern to be the next sew along that I attempted. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this one does have some tweaks that I want to make to it, but I will be doing a sew along very soon in a fabric that you can actually see, to show you how I put the sleeves into the straps and attached both of those, and also cut it off at the waist and then added the skirt, this current skirt, but any skirt that you want to this dress, and made it a zip up at the back as well. They are very minor tweaks, but I do think they're very effective and give a different look to the button-up dresses that I've got back here. And as I say, this is definitely going to be a TNT for me. It's quick to sew, it's fun to make, and it's really fun to wear as well, which is awesome, and mostly what I require from my dresses. So I really hope that video was helpful, and if you've enjoyed it, you might want to check out this one here.